my co-founder, I was like, if for whatever reason the business didn't work out, like you could always go get a job. He worked at IBM. He's had these nice jobs. He worked at a family business that they had that got bought by Bain. Like really like cool stuff. There's no universe where someone hired me. If you look at my resume, it looks insane, right? And there's actually somebody did a study that said there's this concept in the market of like explicit value. So I have a friend I went to college with. She got hired by Cisco right out of college and got promoted like 7 or 8 times. She's excellent. Her explicit value is super high, right? For me, a college dropout who's had 28 jobs or whatever, my explicit value is extremely low. So people with low explicit value are forced into entrepreneurship to prove their worth, more or less. And they did a study, and this is basically how it works. And you can see, my friend who worked at Cisco, she'll probably be there forever. She's talked about doing her own thing, but the trade-off of you have a great cushy job at Cisco where you keep getting promoted.
Welcome to another episode of From Startup to Wunderbrand with Nicholas Kuhner. Today we have a interesting founder, Garrett Dailey. And Garrett maybe do a lot of work going through his CV because there's a lot to... I thought I had a long CV, but man, this guy's got a CV that is as long as his sleeve tattoos there. So we're going to be talking about his business, Lucid Consulting, where he specializes in helping founders and businesses clarify their messaging to close more deals, which is what all entrepreneurs are interested with. We're going to talk a little bit about his background and his multitude of ventures, his startups, dropping out of college, working at Tesla, living in a tent, all these exciting things. So, Garrett, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I see you no longer in a tent. So things are looking up for you.
That's it. It's all uphill from here. Now, that was a month for a brief period of time. So I had, after my first business, I had dropped out of school and started a valet trash company with a guy I used to do sales with. Then we hit some issues, you know what I mean? It happens often with co-founders. So by the end of it, we had given up on the trash business a year in. There's a lot of stuff we didn't know about how that worked, and we could get into that at some point if you want. But at the end of the year, he decided to move to Colorado. I had nothing going on, so I was like, why not? We moved to Colorado. A week after we moved there, we get in a big knockdown, drag out fight. And he's like, I don't want you to live with me anymore. I had moved there to live, he was buying a house in Pueblo, and I was like, okay, well, I got to figure something else out. So I, at the time, was working in a microchip factory in Colorado Springs, and one of the guys training me was like, hey, you could go to the Tesla factory in Reno. So I applied, I got the job, but I was making very little money at the time because, being a founder and all that. And I only had about $200 left, and I was able to buy a tent and a sleeping bag. And the only way I could get my job, which I had a job, I knew I was going to get a paycheck in like 2 or 4 weeks or whatever, was to go to the desert, right? So I lived like 10 miles outside of Sparks, which is like a suburb of Reno. I was like halfway between, Reno and the factory in the desert. And there's like a little spot of land off the side of the highway that's legal to camp on. It's Bureau of Land Management land is what they call it. Like 66% of the state of Nevada is legal to camp on because it's desolate. It's not useful land. And I just lived in the tent for a month. For a week, it rained, so I had to live in my car, and my tent got destroyed twice because it was so windy. It was also very cold. Like, you think desert, you think it's hot. It was like 20 degrees most nights.
And
sometimes
wet.
it was 0.
Very wet.
And the wind was
of the night in a
nuts.
desert. I found that out in the Namib Desert. Now, you also think about Africa and the Namib Desert to be like warm, snakes, but man, it can get cold and wet at night.
Well, that was it. So, believe it or not, while it was stressful in a lot of ways, I actually blew out 3 tires in that month. I had to get one of them. I think when she found out I was moving, one of my aunts sent me a $100 Walmart gift card. And that was the only way I was able to get another tire.
Promise I'll pay you back. I've got a job at Tesla.
And blew out one of the tires. It was crazy. The first time my tent got destroyed, I was like, okay, what can I do? I could bury my tent. I could just dig a hole and then be below the ground level. So I went out and drove to get a shovel. And this is like, I have so little money, right? I bought a shovel for $12 bagged. I start trying to dig a hole for like an hour, and it's just rock, a large rock. There's no digging that can be done. It's just solid rock. So I got mad. I'm driving back and I wasn't paying attention. I hit a pothole, blew out a tire, had to go. It was all kinds of stuff. At this point, my tent is gutted. I didn't have a tent, but it was honestly the best month of my life. Just waking up in the morning and unzipping the tent. It's like crisp outside, no clouds in the sky. You're alone. Nobody's around you and you're free. It was awesome. And so the second time I got destroyed was at the end of the month. And I was like, okay, I'm done. And I told somebody I worked with who's a buddy of mine, and he was like, hey, our roommate just moved out. You come stay with us at least for tonight. And then I ended up living with them.
So that's real entrepreneurial grit right there. What I would have loved to have seen is a cop drive past you as you were digging with the tent next to you. Like where the hook is buried, basically, is the next question. So we'll go into that.
Yeah. No, so believe it or not, there was actually, I never saw another person or anything alive in that spot at all. Never, nothing. It was so far away and in such a weird spot that nobody went out there. So it was like completely alone. You know, I was probably like 5 miles away from the nearest person.
Yeah, I suppose you want to avoid being murdered in your little tent as well. I mean, that must have been a bit of a snakes and murder. I mean, those are the only two things you need to worry about. So super exciting story. Now, you made me do some real homework because I had to go through your CV, and, you know, I've got a long CV because I've got very short attention span. So as soon as I grasp something, I don't want to do this for another season or two. I've got to do something else. And you seem to have a similar, you know, a similar thing like that. And it shows that sort of wanderlust or pioneering spirit that entrepreneurs have. And that must be quite tough. I'm sure you could have stayed probably in your first job and stayed there for 10 years like regular folks. Why didn't you?
Well, my first job was Burger King, so that was no fun. So believe it or not, I think I did the math. At one point, I've had like 28 jobs, and I don't put them all on LinkedIn because some of them didn't last. Well,
17. I mean, I'm sure you could reduce the 17 previous experiences that you've got on LinkedIn down to like a manageable 8 or 10.
Yeah, I probably should. I never look at it because it's not like I'm not applying for jobs, so it doesn't, you know, nobody asks. I do tell my co-founder, we had a conversation about this with my co-founder. I was like, you know, if for whatever reason the business didn't work out, like you could always go get a job. He worked at IBM. He's had these nice jobs. He worked at a family business that they had that got bought by Bain. Like really like cool stuff. There's no universe where someone hired me. If you look at my resume, it looks insane, right? And there's actually, so somebody did a study that said, there's this concept in the market of like explicit value. So I have a friend I went to college with. She got hired by Cisco right out of college and got promoted like 7 or 8 times. She's excellent. Her explicit value is super high, right? For me, a college dropout who's had 28 jobs or whatever, my explicit value is extremely low. So people with low explicit value are forced into entrepreneurship to prove their worth, more or less. And they did a study, and this is basically how it works. And you can see, you know, my friend who worked at Cisco, she'll probably be there forever. She's talked about doing her own thing, but the trade-off of you have a great cushy job at Cisco where you keep getting promoted, but
don't do it
shit as an entrepreneur. Yeah, don't do it.
So 28 jobs. This must mean that you can sell yourself well into a job. So, I mean, that's probably one of the skills that you've got, and probably some of the foundation of your business, which is what we're going to talk a little bit about, which is about telling the right story. So, and pitching. And a lot of businesses have great concepts, great ideas, but have got trash pitches. So talk to me about what is it that you actually do right now, and how, through your experience, you know, your implicit value that you've got. Let's talk about the offerings that you've got and how you help founders and folks who are very good at doing something but are bad at promoting themselves.
I kind of happened into pitching. I had worked at a design agency for 1.5 years when I moved back from Reno to Raleigh. Learned how it works and how to do it. And by the end of it, I was running all of the accounts and hiring, training, and managing all the employees. I basically was doing everything. I was like, okay, I could probably do this myself. So I had my design agency, which I started in June of 2021, Ion Enterprises. In the process of working there, I had a client, a company called Idea Market, a web startup built on Ethereum that was trying to quantify the value of concepts. If people would buy a concept, they believe it's more valuable, and that creates a market for ideas. They hired me to do Instagram post design for them. I had 30 Instagram posts. 3 months later, now I'm their chief of staff. I started doing all kinds of stuff, and That was honestly one of the most fun jobs I ever had. I got to bring on a lot of people, built a team. I was in charge of the design department. I ran the marketing department, liaised with the devs. That was our organization. I think we had like 12 or 13 people at the max. And in the process, I worked with the founder, Mike Elias, on raising their next round. So I helped build out the deck that they used to raise $600K from mask.io from, which was awesome at the time. You know, that was a big deal. That bought us a lot of runway because you were running out of cash. I realized that in the winter, like we had like this like 3 months before I left, I realized the model was like fundamentally not solid. And I told them about it. And I was like, okay, you're going to have to fire me and my whole team and the designers and everyone. Just maybe keep the UX guy because you guys have to pivot. And there's no point in marketing if you burn all your money on ads and then you're gone the next day, right? So I left in the middle of March of, this is 2022, I think. Yeah, this is 2022 because the crypto market had begun to plummet. This is a really bad time. And I had this idea that I'd been working on for a couple of years in the background, just thinking through it for a social media platform for content creators where they own their own content and thus you can't censor them. Because what happens when people make social platforms that are censorship free is you make social platforms that are full of the worst people in the world. But instead, if you made it really easy for content creators to own their content, you can solve the censorship problem without telling people that you're solving it. And then you don't become a cesspool for like the worst possible people. So I was working on that. I built out, the brand and designed a mock-up UX and, like 60 or 70 app screens and made a prototype and everything and made a deck and went to go raise because I'd seen it done. And I was like, okay, I could probably do this. And my current co-founder, Brian, actually came on as an advisor. I met him at a crypto meetup in Durham and he ended up being our best advisor. He did the work of 5 people. He got us all our VC meetings, which was 5 total. And we got an offer on the 5th pitch. And it wasn't a very good offer. And at the time, this is like August of 2022. So VCs are running for the hills, maybe September. The market is completely dead. It's lots of FUD. It's a bad time. And so I had to decide. I was like, okay, well, we got this offer. This is like not even a tenth of what we were trying to raise, like 200K, and we were raising 2.5. So we shuttered it. And then I was like, all right, if I got an offer on my 5th pitch, I'm probably pretty good at this because I've looked at the stats and that's not normal. I think it's 0.5% of startups that go out to fundraise get funded or something like that. Oh, I went back to doing my agency full time and I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on this and just get really, really good at pitch decks because this is clearly something I have some sort of aptitude for and most people seem to be terrible at. So I've been working on pitch decks since then. I don't have a perfect number in my head right now, but I believe that we're somewhere around 15 million in raised funds for clients. We typically do seed and series A, sometimes pre-seed. So it's a lot of smaller little raises. I think over 50% of our clients have raised. And a lot of them are currently still raising. Our numbers are pretty good compared to the industry. But yeah, I can get into a little bit more about what you do in the pitching process.
Well, I think it's quite an interesting process. And again, the interesting thing about being an entrepreneur or having all of these jobs is you never know which one of your jobs is going to give you that aha moment or when that information that you've learned through a trash job comes back and becomes useful. And the whole Web 3.0 is a fascinating space. It's just having such a tough time catching on. I mean, I've spoken to some great guys with amazing ideas with Web 3.0, but it's just not ready. And the crypto crash and all of these gangsters in the crypto space have kind of made that market almost untenable. But yeah, in terms of pitching, do you think that your mustache puts people off? No.
I certainly hope not. I don't know. I feel like it adds flavor, Yeah. I find that if I'm clean shaven,
it's because you look like you're 12 years old. I've had the same thing. I've had to grow a beard. My wife won't be with me if I don't have a beard. So I've got a soft baby face under this manly exterior that I currently exude. Yes, I totally get it. Let's talk pitching. I mean, say you're a startup, you've got a fantastic idea, you've sold a prototype or two, and you're in an industry like crypto or Web 3.0 or trying to launch your app. but you need to raise money. Like you said, a lot of companies sort of are running on fumes at this stage. And you mentioned that after your fifth pitch, you got offered cash. Do you give some advice as well for folks who are creating pitch decks to manage their expectations? Because obviously the expectation is first pitch, I'm going to go and, they're going to love me. And then boom, you get shot down and your ego and momentum goes. Can you maybe talk through the process of setting a client up for success when it comes to pitching?
Yeah, I think the first thing that you have to realize is that that number, 0.5% of startups that go out to raise will raise, is really important to remember. So as your baseline, this isn't how that math works, but you can use this as a reference. You should expect to pitch 101 times. If you do 101, you're at least better than that math caliber expectations.
So
and
I think the thing that's like Dr. Seuss, the chap who wrote the Cat in the Hat books. It was on his 100th or 101 submission that somebody actually bought the book. So yeah, that's a real story.
Yeah, I think Colonel Sanders, the KFC guy, got rejected like 87 or 187 times for bank loans before he got one that worked. So, that I resonate with that a lot. You got to just keep doing stuff. Obviously, I've done all kinds of things, and I think with pitching, you have to have that in mind. What I wish I had known going into the process of raising is that you're supposed to start talking to VCs 6 months before you start raising. I think that the ability to get VC meetings is the most individually important part of the process, because generally you're not going to get meetings from outreach, you're going to get meetings from intros. And if you have access to people that can get you intros to VCs, you are automatically coming in the front door instead of, getting denied at the side door, right? I think that's something that people don't really get, because what we want to believe is that business, and especially fundraising, is a game of pure merit, where good ideas always win. People always understand good ideas, and that's absolutely not the case. I wish it was, but people are really horribly irrational and tribalistic. And I would argue VCs are broadly like herd animals. They follow what other VCs are doing. While this is troubling information, coming to terms with it makes your life better. Because when you understand that, you understand, okay, there's a game that we have to play. I can learn how to play this game, which is I can build credibility. I can build authority. I can find ways to bootstrap that if I don't have it, right? Good design builds legitimacy, right? Having letters of intent from people that might use your product or service builds legitimacy. When we raised for Gravity, we went and got letters of intent from content creators until we had 5.5 million followers worth of content creators. So we had a total, I think we had 30 or something, and that's added up to 5 million. And our argument was like, hey, if we can get 10% of their followers to come over, then we've got 500,000 people on the platform or something like that. So that's, there are ways around that. And of course, I was raising with a Figma prototype. We had a CTO, but he hadn't gotten that far into building out anything. And it's often easier to raise on an idea than it is on something that exists, because if it exists, then they're going to ask you why you're not selling it yet. Why don't you have users or revenue or whatever? And that seemed to be the case when I raised, and I've seen that be the case with a lot of founders. I think, it gets harder when you get into seed or Series A, when you already have something and people start, especially Series A, they're looking a lot more at the metrics and the growth. But that's not really what I help people. To some extent, we can help with consulting on business structure and stuff like that. But really what I help people with is, how do I make this idea sound really palatable, knowing the psychology of the kind of people that we're pitching it to. And I think the way that you really do that is you switch from this perspective of what I see, especially technical founders do, which is, I am going to explain this thing until you want it, which is not how anything works, to the world has changed. That change creates both a positive opportunity and a negative opportunity, a risk. And people who capitalize on the positive opportunity will be winners and get the good future. And people who suffer from the risk will be losers and get the bad future. And there's other stuff that's built into this framework that we use, like the hero's journey and stuff like that. But this, when you break it down in this way, like, hey, there's a change in the world, meaning this was not possible to do 5 years ago or 5 years in the future. It has to happen right now. You've created urgency. We break that change down into technological, social, and economic factors. So there's money to pay for it. People want it, and it's technologically possible, right? And when you do that, that's all that you're checking these boxes in their head. Because if you have, say, somebody says, oh, well, loneliness is I've seen this pitch a bunch of times for different things. Loneliness is a huge problem. The world's different. Social media made everyone lonely or something like that, right? Well, it's a huge social problem. Technologically, it doesn't look like technology solves loneliness. And economically, while people want to be less lonely, I don't know if they really pay for it. So you see people go out and raise for things fixing loneliness. It's a community, it's an app, it's a mental health thing, whatever. And it just falls flat because it's not satisfying the basic criteria of a major change in the world that has those three aspects to it.
So part of your role is basically filtering out the trash as well. I'm sure you have had a couple of clients come to you, and this is probably a bit of a challenge for you now that you've been in this business for a while, is that I'm sure you see some real bad ideas that are not going to make it. Can you polish a turd, as we say? Can you
It's
massage
tricky.
it
So
into something that, as you mentioned, sometimes it's the idea versus an actual finished product. Do the VCs give these guys a second chance to come back with an improved idea, or do you have a one-time opportunity?
You should treat it like you have a one-time opportunity. The actual answer is if a VC says no and another one says yes, you can go back to the one that said no and they're going to say, oh my God, it sounds so great. We want in, right? Once you get a lead investor, every year the hot girl of the party, everybody wants a piece of you, right? Which is, again, part of the sad truth of it is that's how it works, right? One of our clients, we did their deck. A month later, they got their lead investor. They'd struggled for months to raise. They got their lead for $2 million. And I believe then over the next 2 weeks, they got the other $2 million from other people, right? And it was just like very fast once it started moving. Because we just fixed some of the stuff they were talking about and cleaned it up and simplified it down. No, the trick is that if you're pre-seed, it is very hard to know if your idea is bad or if you're great. You can tell if you've been in this long enough when you see something that's like objectively a bad idea. I watched some guy pitch not too long ago about robots that clean your house. Technologically plausible, those Tesla robots are pretty advanced, but the issue was that they had no robot building experience on their team slide. And so whether it's a good idea or not, it's unlikely that they're going to pull it off regardless, right? Which is another thing you can do when you're pitching. So something that's I call it slide zero. So when you start, generally you're in a room pitching someone or you're on a Zoom call, you have your title slide pulled up. What you say when you introduce yourself on that slide counts as slide zero, right? It's the stuff you say before you get into the pitch. And so this is typically when you have to introduce yourself. I usually put team slides further back in the deck. Some people do them early, but if you have the team slide further back, then I split up the founder, who I assume is the one pitching, from the rest of the team. And so what you end up doing is something like, hey, my name's Garrett. I have this really interesting experience over the years where I've worked with lots of technical founders, and I discovered they all have this one problem in common. It's a really big problem. And as a result, here's Lucid. Lucid helps technical founders with their pitch so they can raise more capital and close more deals, right? The trick with that little segue is that you can use the introduction of yourself as a way to build authority on the subject, because what a VC wants to hear is, this person has been chosen by the gods to have this specific set of experiences and skills so that they're the only one that could understand this problem and solve it, right? That's what you're trying to say at the beginning. And then you get to educate them a little bit about the nature of the problem and the problem space, but you've already qualified yourself by tying your personal story into the thing that you're pitching. And this is where you see people that have what I would call founder problem mismatch, where the founder has a good idea and they potentially are a good founder, but it's just not plausible that they care that much, which is why I highly advise everyone work on something that you're passionate about. Don't fall in love with your business, though. That's the other side of that double-edged sword, because then you make stupid decisions.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
does that all
And
make sense? That was kind
when
of a
we're
rant.
talking about presentations, there's the 5-slide presentation, and then there's the doozy, the death by PowerPoint one. Do you do both? And which is more complicated, a 5-slide presentation or the whole enchilada?
Yeah, so in a dream scenario, the way I would like interactions around the pitch to go is you reach out and schedule meetings somehow with VCs. You give them enough information to be interested, and then you present our version of the deck we call the narrative format deck, which usually ends up being like 15 slides, a little bit longer than normal. But in that version, we get to control the way that they receive the information. And so the final result is better, right? You don't always have this kind of control. Sometimes you have to email a deck to people. So if you are going to do an email deck, what I recommend people do is a down version of that deck. I usually use the Sequoia format. So there's a very standardized 10-slide deck. I like that one. You can use whatever you want. Airbnb, I think their deck, which is considered to be the best, is very similar to that. But if you look at people that talk about the structured pitch decks, it's totally arbitrary. I think they did a study of like 20 people that work on them, and only 6 slides are considered to be essential. So you could do it shorter if you want to, but really it's what is the way that I need to present this information in a story that is the most effective to convey it, right? Sometimes you focus on your traction. Sometimes you avoid your traction because you don't have any, right? Sometimes you focus on the market opportunity. I mean, you generally are always focused on the market opportunity. Sometimes you're focusing more on the growth of the market. Like, hey, we're making a long-term play because we're trying to capture this as it grows. It's not big right now, but we can get in early and get it, right? But all of that really comes down to is what is the best way to present it within the constraints of the interaction that you're having. If you have 5 minutes, yeah, you probably don't want to have a 15-slide deck. If you have an hour, you probably don't want to talk for an hour regardless. You should never, ever pitch longer than 20 minutes. Then the rest of it could be conversation, and then you should have really a robust appendix with answers to every question you think they're going to ask. One of my mentors or advisors from Gravity, my startup, said, every time you get a question you don't know the answer to, make a new slide and put it in the appendix. VC, I probably don't email the appendix stuck out to people, but you can use something that's effective in pitching is when you have an answer to a question that they asked, it's a lot like judo, right? They're throwing a punch and you just like dodge it, right? And the more of those you have, the more you instill confidence because it's like, oh my God, they really thought of everything, didn't they? And this is part of where you're probably not going to succeed on your first pitch. It's unlikely you'll succeed on your 5th. But as you accumulate pitches, what you're doing the same thing a comedian does when they build their set, right? So Joe Rogan's going to do a comedy special in 2 years. He's going to go on tour and workshop material every night that he has to show. And at the end of that, when he's got it all perfect, then he records, right? And similarly, you should find opportunities to pitch at least 25 or 50 times before you go and pitch anybody that could give you money. And part of the thing that you could do with this is pitch potential customers, try and get letters of intent, pitch people that might have expertise that can give you feedback, whatever it takes to get more pitches under your belt. Because the more you pitch, the more likely your pitch is to be good. And almost none of them, or even if you work with us, the version that you get when we get done is going to be not as good as the version that you get when we've done 5 iterations of it because you pitched 20 times.
I love so much what you just said there. And I've said this to my class, I've said this to other customers, that presenting is a craft. And exactly like a comedian, the comedian says that same joke 20 times or 1,000 times to a whole bunch of audiences and massages it and gets the timing absolutely perfectly right. And then it just looks natural when you're presenting. And that's a skill. That's not, you cannot expect, as you said, on your first pitch or your first attempt to look professional. And you can see this when you can see pros versus noobs in this perspective. Now, you bring out the important point here of storytelling. And you spoke about the hero's journey. And the other aspect is that you are speaking to a specific cabal of people that are expecting storytelling in a very specific manner, because that is how it's almost like going to church and you start out with these prayers and you stand up, you kneel, you sit down, and then there's the gospel, then there's the amen afterwards. There's this expected process. And that's something that I guess you understand, this mystical language of the VCs, which is part of your value. But let's talk about storytelling. I mean, you're selling an app that solves loneliness or is a a garbage valet business. How do you tell a compelling story about a service? I mean, it's a service that you're going to pay cash for. Why do you need to create a story for it?
So this is going to be a little heady, but I find this to be the best way to say it. Stories are how we transmit cause and effect information as humans, right? A story has a hero and a villain, someone you should be like or want to be like, and someone you don't want to be like or shouldn't be like. They have things that happen, right? Like life, things occur. And the hero responds in a way that helps them overcome these challenges and get a positive outcome. And a villain responds in a way that either creates challenges or leads to negative outcomes, right? There obviously are tragedies. Tragedies are more like, hey, if you're trying to be a good person, avoid doing these things because it's easy to fall into this trap and then you're screwed at the end. But when you understand that, it's like if I have a textbook that is just presenting facts about molecules, right? It may be factually accurate, but that is not the way that I understand in my head how molecules work. When you hear a story about the atom bomb, they say, oh yeah, well, they figured that atoms have all this energy stored in them. And if you could smash them together, they release that energy. Spent years and years and did all these things. And at the end of that, they figured out how to do it and they made nukes, right? Then you start to understand what that means in context. And that's what's so important about storytelling. Storytelling allows you to layer in tons of context in a form that doesn't feel overwhelming, right? If I read you all of the technical studies on the way that the Manhattan Project was put together, you would not understand it unless you're a nuclear physicist, right? If you're listening to this, if you are a nuclear physicist, I hope, that's correct. It'd be interesting. I would love to hear what you're working on. But if it's that ability to tie things together, to give someone a person to root for or want to be, and follow that person through the story that allows them to insert themselves in it, and they start to see it as real. And the trick when you're pitching is you're kind of doing two of these at once. This is why pitching is harder than normal sales. In sales, you're responding directly to the customer. You're saying, you were having a bad day because you're lonely until you discover this app, and this app makes you have friends, and now you're not lonely anymore. Give me $45 a month, right? When you're pitching VCs, you have to pitch the customer pitch in there, but you also have to pitch them. And it's more important that you're pitching them, but you have to convincingly do both. So you would say, oh, well, Jimmy was lonely, or you would say yourself, really. I mean, if you're pitching, you usually leave it yourself. You'd say, hey, there's an epidemic of loneliness around the world. Like 60% of people report feeling lonely multiple times a week or something like that. I really struggled with this personally. And the way that I solved this was through the Buddy system or something. So I created BuddyBot. It's an AI platform that creates a buddy for you to hang out with that makes you less lonely.
Yeah,
I doubt that
lonely
would work,
just listening to that.
I'm just riffing. Yeah, they just had today, I saw the news came out. Somebody had like an AI companion that encouraged him to kill himself or something, which is really sad, but unsurprising. Yeah. It's like Black Mirror called this stuff, but yeah. So don't do that. Don't do, make sure you're solving a real problem in a way that's plausible. If you tell me, and this is, happens a lot with AI projects. So like, oh, well, AI can solve this thing. It's like, okay, maybe it can, but you haven't convinced me of the ability to get that done, because either you haven't demonstrated the expertise on the subject, you haven't convincingly explained how it works in a way that's not technically overwhelming, which is important. Something I tell people is it's not about how it works. It's about how it works for you, the customer, right? So you say, I could tell you the 400 steps that go into making a pitch deck with people, but really what we do is first we figure out, the why of your story. We're going to understand why the world's changing. Why does this have to exist? Then we're going to figure out how your product works to address that. And then we're going to figure out what the details are of your pitch, the how much you're asking for, what your market size is, all that kind of stuff. And while that's a dramatic oversimplification, it makes it really easy to understand what the process is like. If I told you step by step all the things we're going to do, which takes, a month and is convoluted, you would be bored to tears and you wouldn't benefit from that. So when you tell people how stuff works, just remember that it's always 3 steps. It's always 3 steps. It doesn't matter how many steps it is. It's always 3. 3 features, 3 benefits. Keep it simple.
So
No one
Garrett, I
cares.
can see you're excited about the work that you do, and I can see in your face. So is this the business that you're going to focus your 100% attention on for the next couple of years? I see you in North Carolina and in Texas.
My co-founder's in
Yeah,
Raleigh.
so
I live in
you're
Austin,
spread out
Texas.
around the country. What is next for you guys? Because I see you've got over 70 happy customers on your website. What is your goal for this business? Is it to grow headcount? Is it to be able to fulfill your dream of living not in a tent, but in a caravan, or a Winnebago that goes around the country, or traveling around the world? What is it that you want out of this business?
I have a couple goals. The first of which is my intention is we get, this is something my co-founder is devoting a lot of cycles to figuring out, but if we can figure out an ongoing consulting or some other kind of recurring revenue service, he's doing a lot of lead gen for people now, like LinkedIn outreach and stuff like that. Then what I want to be able to do is scale up our recurring revenue in such that I can then do pitch decks strictly on equity. And if I can do pitch deck just on equity, then we can accumulate a lot of equity from companies. Also, it's a great deal and the incentives are aligned with the startups because, what we usually end up having to do is do deferred cash anyway. So maybe it's however many thousands of dollars, but we do two-thirds of that after you raise a certain amount and then a third up front, right? That's cool. We're taking a risk with them. I'd like to be rewarded for that risk by getting some equity. And I'd also like to make it really easy for them in the front end, because if you're raising, you generally don't have any money at all. It's very hard. This is kind of a hard business to be in, but I love it so much, which is the catch, so it's worth it. But ideally move in the direction of providing pitch deck design and narrative development as a strictly equity service. So it doesn't cost you anything up front. And then going forward, my intention has always been, I need to get so good at pitching that the next time I have a startup I want to raise for, that it's going to be really easy to raise, right? So we played around with ideas of incubating a couple different products or like digital services. My co-founder is also a developer. He's a DevOps engineer at IBM. So between the two of us, I have a design background. We could totally ship an entire thing. So we may start playing with that, but our rule is we're not talking about it until next year. So we have our quarter set already. So just finishing the year out, and then we'll see what it is.
I've come across, and I've been meaning to do it for a couple of years, is create some of my own courses. I do lots of workshops and keynotes and things like that. And I came across Teachable. They're not sponsoring this, don't worry, but Teachable has a real easy process for you to set up courses specifically for what you're doing. So you're talking about recurring revenue. If you've got some really good ideas regarding your processes that people, for example, not in the US or in places that you're not able to reach out to, I would suggest putting some short courses in terms of how to do pre-seed, seed, etc. funding, and have those as courses for $45 or $500 or whatever. And there's some nice recurring cash for you. If you've got your processes done already, I reckon that will be a good additional revenue stream for you. So stick at it. I think you're doing a great job. Your website's got some great examples on it. And raising $15 million for clients, that's real cash money. So it's obviously working. So all the best. Now, where can I send folks to learn a little bit more about you? And if they want to learn how to pitch, I'm going to ask, if guys from outside of the US want to know how to pitch to US VCs, are you somebody they can chat to?
Oh yeah, as long as you speak English. I only speak English. I know a lot of founders that I've worked with have English as a second language. I would argue it's even more important to nail your pitch because you're already playing at a huge disadvantage. That doesn't make it unwinnable. But I'm certainly happy to help with that. And also, it's always good to have a second set of eyes for if you are English as a second language from a person that speaks it as a first language. It helps a lot. You can find us, lucidconsult.ing is our website. If you do lucidconsult.ing/G, that's my calendar. Feel free to book 30 minutes. We can chat. I will not charge you for that. Happy to talk to whomever. If you want to find, I wrote philosophy for a long time. I have my own personal website that has my old blog on it at gdailey.com, DAILEY. And And outside of that, for business content, you will get the most value out of following me on LinkedIn. That is where, we've recently started doing a little bit more in the form of content. You can see a lot of little explainers and snippets once a week on Fridays on LinkedIn, hour-long stream, usually with a guest entrepreneur that we interview and figure out. But it's really an open kind of office hours format where people can come in and ask us for advice on their pitch, their go-to-market, their ops. Brian, my co-founder, is a big ops guy. So he knows everything in the world about process development, metrics, targeting, all that kind of stuff. So but yeah,
Awesome. Well,
that's
I'll
pretty
stick
much it.
those links in the description so folks can just click on those. But Garrett, it's been great chatting to you. And I look forward to seeing more exciting businesses being generated by you.
Likewise, I appreciate you having me on. This has been great.